Hey crew, I've got the keys to my 23 Dodge Challenger SRT Demon 170 and my 26 BMW M2 CS. And in this video, I'm gonna compare them. You're asking yourself, why on earth would I compare a muscle car to a sports car? And I'll give you 3 reasons. The first is that the starting and as optioned prices are almost identical. The second is that they actually have a lot more in common than you might expect. And the third, I own both of them and I think it'll be fun, so get on board. Let's start with my Demon 170, which replaced my Cadillac CT5V Blackwing about 2 years ago. That car I miss dearly, and with its supercharged V8 and its rear-wheel drive and its manual transmission, it was also in the category of muscle car like the Demon, but it was much more aligned in purpose with the M2 CS, targeting track driving and corner carving. So actually, if you line those cars up, CS, then Blackwing, then Demon, it would almost be a spectrum of sports to muscle car. What attracted me to the 170 was just the ludicrousness of it, which is in fact a word, by the way. It was the most powerful American production car. Now that's the Corvette ZR1, but it's still the most powerful American muscle car with 1,025 horsepower. It's still the quickest street legal on a drag strip 0 to 60 of 1.66 seconds, and it's just all packaged up in this classic / modern muscle car body. It's got street legal drag tires, 245 section front, 315 at the back, Mickey Thompson. They're basically tissue paper when used on the street, but they adhere incredibly well on a drag strip. The front just looks like any other Challenger though. Well, except for that giant intake, which happens to say alcohol injected. That's a giveaway to the E85 fuel it runs on. And I got it with the matte finish to that intake to contrast this plum crazy purple paint job, which I adore. The profile is comically proportioned with those giant rear fender flares and all that tire sidewall, the gap between the body and the tires, and then up front, that bulging hood. Then the back end is just hilariously wide. I mean, part of that's visual with the rectangular taillights and tailpipes, but also there's this stretching matte black spoiler, and just with the fender flares, there's so much car here. Look, to be perfectly honest, aesthetically, the M2 CS is way better looking of a car, and that's coming from someone who thinks the F87 generation, the predecessor, was much prettier than that. But if you want to talk about a vehicle that you see it and you pucker up a little bit, it's the Demon 170. I mean, it has a badge of a demon with yellow eyes. That's intimidating. Transitioning from the Demon to the CS, I wanted to pull out these keys again real quick to show you some of the differences. So this key, for the most part, looks like any other Hellcat key in the red, but it does have this Demon script here, and it is 3-dimensional and has some texture to it, and the weight is pretty solid. Whereas the M2 CS key looks like any other kind of last generation of BMW key with the plastics and the BMW logo. The only difference is that you get the M tricolor on the side. Nothing that is distinct to the CS. It would have been great to have a CS badge on the back and a little more heft to it. This is honestly disappointing for the price of this car. And now to address the elephant in the room, it's almost as big as an elephant. The Demon 170, it is significantly larger than the M2 CS, 17 inches longer, 4 inches, not including the mirrors, 4 inches wider and 2 inches taller. It takes up so much more room in a lane or in my garage or in my driveway. You see the difference clearly between both vehicles' footprints. Before diving into the styling callouts of the CS, if you didn't see my How I Ordered My M2 CS video or my first drive video, then here's a refresher on why I picked it. I had an E36 M3. I loved that driving experience, and I missed having a sports car. This is so much fun, but a sports car is obviously something very different. And I also like cars that not everyone has. 3,300 of those built, and what will be about 2,000 of these built. It feels unique. And part of what makes this car so unique is that velvet blue color, while the Plum Crazy is basically just dark purple or bright purple, depending on the sunlight. The different hues of blue and violet and purple and metallic flake do present themselves depending on the light cast on this car. I really adore this paint job. And though the 170 has its bulbous and shouty, intimidating, street-legal drag car proportions, there were only options of the carbon fiber wheels, which were $12,000. I couldn't justify that price point. Whereas the M2 CS has a lot of other glitzy styling cues. It does have the same hood without it being carbon fiber like the F87 generation as the standard M2, but it's got unique inserts for the grille. It does have projector LED headlights as standard, whereas those are HIDs, for goodness sakes. It has these bronze 20-inch front, 21-inch rear wheels, whereas those are much more muted, and it has optional carbon ceramic brakes with the red painted calipers. That's what I optioned on. These are wrapped up in Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tires, a super sticky compound for the street or the track. We've got these carbon fiber door mirror covers, wish that had some more carbon fiber there, and it has a carbon fiber roof. You look at the profile, it's very similar to the standard M2, except for that it is lowered 0.2 of an inch, and it has this signature M3 CSL derived ducktailing carbon fiber trunk lid. The back end has much more style than the slabbed panels of the Demon 170. It's actually not even my favorite look of this car, but it does have some cool callouts like the trunk lid, like the M2 CS badge, the thin LED taillights, this carbon fiber diffuser, and the quad outlet black finished exhaust ports. Apart from sharing a similar paint color, the cars couldn't look much more different. You've got this simplistic, intimidating muscle car and this hyper angular carbon fiber and bronze wheel studded modern sports car. The question is, which looks cooler? And I'll let you answer that for me in the comments. Let's look at the interior. Let's stick with the CS to start, then we'll get to the Demon. And one more point before we get into the cabin. The trunk size of the M2 is actually not that bad. You can fit a good amount of stuff back here and pull on those two levers to split fold the rear seats. The Demon's trunk, though, is absolutely cavernous. When first getting in the CS, you have a variety of options to choose from. You could use your phone to remote start it and unlock it. You can use a key card to put right there and unlock the doors, or of course your key fob. And there is smart keyless entry, so with the key fob on, you just touch the door handle and then we'll automatically unlock the doors. Opening up and looking inside, we have these very impressive carbon bucket seats. They're power adjusting, they're also heated, and they have grab handles built in, and this scary carbon fiber hump. It's scary if you're a male, and pass-throughs for a racing harness. You can remove this piece to accommodate a helmet, and then if you pull on this tab and angle it forward, the seat will automatically power out of the way to give you access to the two rear seats. And sliding on back here, not too difficult. And as the seat moves back into position, you can see that for me at 6 feet tall, my knees are splayed out just a little bit, but I can fit except for headroom. My head is pressed up against this roof, which doesn't have a suede headliner like you do get in the Demon 170, so I can't sit back to this headrest, but at least if I didn't have someone here, I could fold it down like this one is shown. No armrests, you do have this little cubby here, no USB ports, and this is just a pass-through. So I would say this works for kids, but not necessarily for adults of my size. Back up front, we've got some injection molding here with a little design, hard plastics down low, and leatherette with padding for your armrest, 2 positions of memory for your seats and door mirrors, and then your trunk release button is right there along with your power adjusting door mirrors. There's also a Harman Kardon sound system as standard, and getting into the seat does require care with those high fixed side bolsters, and again that carbon fiber hump in the center. Closing up that door, get a nice solid thud. And looking ahead, I have these 2 screens within a single curved glass housing, vivid displays adjustable for the gauge cluster and of course for the infotainment screen, and it's quite responsive. You can touch the screen, you can use these physical controls for volume and seek and defrosters, and all these physical adjustments down here along with this scroll wheel if you don't want to be distracted while driving. There's also a head-up display built in as standard. The steering wheel is suede wrapped and very thick with a flat bottom, carbon fiber and gloss finish, leather-wrapped airbag cover, and then your customizable M1 and M2 modes, along with these large paddles that have carbon fiber facing to them. It's a very impressive and modern vantage point as the driver. And even here, you've got all this carbon fiber for the center tunnel. You lose out on cup holders, but you retain a wireless charging pad. You've got a spot for your key, USB-A port, your leather-wrapped tricolor stitched gear selector and drive modes, and then you miss out on some storage here. Up on the dash, more gloss carbon fiber, and there's even more carbon fiber here on the doors that illuminates the letters CS. Now let's compare that to the Demon. To get in the Demon, like the CS, there is an app to unlock or remote start the car. You can, of course, use the key fob or keep the key fob in your pocket and either press on the door handle to unlock it or hit this button here to lock it. Now, I will say my hand always is slipping off the Demon 170's door handle, whereas even though that doesn't have a pull handle like this, it still is not something that I ever miss the handle to open. Opening up the doors, looking inside, we actually have better materials on the upper part of the door trim. This is leatherette with a contrast stitching. This is leather with padding right here. You've got your one-touch windows like that car, power adjusting door mirrors here, and 2 positions of memory. This is all hard plastic like the CS, but it's more of a flat panel, more obvious hard plastics here. The seats are a little less impressive than the carbon buckets. You do have lots of this soft Laguna leather, and there is a suede insert and a Demon 170 logo badge imprinted right there, and I optioned on the Demon Red Seatbelts, which look pretty darn cool, but just not as wow as those carbon buckets in that car. And then when you want to get into the back seats, pull on this lever, and the seat doesn't automatically slide forward. If you go to the passenger side, it will on rails when you click it forward slide, but here I would have to power adjust it out of the way, and that takes time. Once I have done that though, getting into the back is actually even easier than in the CS. And though the seat isn't exactly where I left it, having slid it further forward, I can say that there's about as restrictive level of knee room back here as that car, but I have much more headroom. I can actually sit fully upright or put my head back on that headrest. So you could fit a full-size adult here in the back seats too, and these seats are super squishy and comfortable. There's an armrest that comes down with 2 cup holders, and you have air vents, which you don't have in the CS. No USB ports though, and you even have an armrest over here. This is pretty great. Getting into the front seats, I love this as a contrast to the CS. I just kind of flop in. I don't have to be careful or avoid anything. It's just a big cushy couch chair. And closing up that door, there's actually a pretty solid thud as well. Looking in front of me, I've got another suede wrap steering wheel, not as thick this time, though I kind of prefer this. The paddles though, I don't like nearly as much. They've got this nice aluminum finish, but they only go down like 2.5 inches. Then they stop and turn into some hotkeys for the infotainment system. Really wish those were full paddles. Beyond that, I've got 2 analog gauges. Let me put the car into full accessory mode. See the Demon logo come on the TFT display, and now some illumination for the analog gauges. They fit in this kind of retro feeling muscle car, but it's not as visually impressive as the CS's twin screens. You do have a lot of carbon fiber around that infotainment screen, and it is a matte finish, which is a nice contrast to the gloss in the CS. Up on the dashboard, we've got injection molding and contrast stitching, no head-up display. You do have that suede headliner that I mentioned, and this infotainment is feeling pretty outdated at this point. It's not so slow in response, but it's not as crystal clear and impressive with the graphics. More carbon fiber here in the center. You do have cup holders though, and a center console, which is leather padded up top and has a good amount of space with 2 USB-A ports and a DC outlet here to match the DC outlet that is down there. There are also physical dials for volume and for media and climate adjustments. Much more intuitive, much easier to use than infotainment settings. There also is a Demon logo on the passenger side with your VIN number out of the 3300 build. So while it isn't as glitzy or tech-rich as the CS, it does have comfort and space and some nicer materials. Now it's time to take the 170 for a drive. All right, let's fire it up. Supercharged V8 checking in. Let's listen to the idle from outside. a deliciously throaty rumble to greet us. Before I go anywhere, I do need to release the push-style e-brake off to the side, which is a contrast certainly to the modern electronic parking brakes, but I kind of like it. Now to close the door, I have to reach very far over, and then I'll throw on my seatbelts before pulling the gear selector back into drive, prompting a backup camera that fills the screen but is a pretty low resolution. It does have trajectory lines though, so as I scoot on out of here, I can see where I'm going. And then I am going to start with an attempted turning circle demonstration. Pull off to the side, line up, and then turn the wheel and see if I can clear my CS, which I am gonna do, because the turning circle in the Demon 170 is actually great. For as big as it is, it's awesome. How does the turn signal sound? Pretty loud. Not an obnoxious tone though. And let's say someone is driving erratically on the road and I feel the need to use my horn. What are they gonna hear? It's so modest for such a muscular car. I guess you have to rely on the supercharged V8 to intimidate them otherwise. Speaking of that prodigious powertrain, it's a 6.2 liter supercharged V8 that makes 900 horsepower when you're on normal 91 octane gas, but 1,025 when you're using E85 fuel. And there is a spectrum there where you could use a mix of fuels and it's going to automatically adjust via the ECU how much power you are creating at any given moment. And if you don't have the E85, then your torque figure is like 810 pound-feet, but if you do have E85, then it's 945. And all of that power and torque is routed through an 8-speed torque converter automatic to just the rear tire. Though, and this is my favorite part as a daily driver, despite the outlandish numbers this car makes, it is an absolute peach to just mosey around town. I've got it right now in the auto and eco setting, which does dull the throttle response considerably, but it makes it so this doesn't feel any less agreeable than a standard Challenger Hellcat. It just gets up to speed, and it does so as quickly as you want it to, but it can just be chill. And the 8-speed auto is smooth in those gear changes. And better still, the drag suspension on the 170 is built for additional squat to really hook up on a drag strip, but that means that on the road, it just has even greater compliance than a normal Challenger Hellcat. You add to that these abundantly plush chairs, which hold me well in place with the suede insert, but the bolsters aren't too restrictive, and I just feel so relaxed. As a driver, I do wish I could lower this seat a little more, because though headroom isn't a problem, I've got plenty of that, it does feel like I'm staring very far down at the steering wheel, and that sometimes can cap my visibility up top where I'm sitting at a light and I have to duck down to actually see it go green. The name of the game with this car on a daily basis is comfort. Just the sprawling space around me, the seats, the visibility I have even out over that bulging hood, nice large side windows. There is a blind spot right there at the C-pillar, but I do have blind spot monitoring to help. View out the back isn't bad at all. I just have this confidence and this comfort that I relish. I also never truly escape that supercharger whine or the rumbling Hemi V8 note. They're always on tap and I can elicit them at a moment of my choosing. So relaxation and connection with your muscle car are not mutually exclusive, they're symbiotic. And here's a real surprise. Apart from that V8 noise or the supercharger whine, it's pretty quiet inside this cabin at a good clip. I'll quiet up now so you can hear it. You really hear next to nothing in terms of wind noise, and even the tires aren't making all that much hum. It's just the faint murmur of V8 rumble, or you dig into the throttle and supercharger whine, which you want to hear. You don't want to hear other things. And I think it's about time we hear more from that motor. So let's take it out of eco, put it into drag mode. See, it's queuing up the 1,025 horsepower. And carefully, I'm going to lay into the throttle. Oh, good heavens! Come on! That is not to be believed. You think you've put all into it. You think you're there, and then you just go a little further with the throttle, and it uncorks everything. But I cannot mash the throttle. That, even in third or fourth gear, is just gonna light up the rear tires. So I have to load it up and just feel the back end squish on down, put all the weight back there, and just gear up for launch. Good Lord! I'm so rightfully afraid of wide open throttle in this car. And it's the only car I've ever lived with that I felt that way. But I think it's important. It's that self-preservation thing. Oh my gosh. And don't get me wrong, you can have fun when you're not at wide open throttle, but knowing there's more, knowing you can go there. This is a street legal production car. Oh, it boggles the mind. Listen to the V8, look at... Listen to the supercharger. I can't even put words together. I am so overwhelmed by this car in all the right ways. Oh my gosh! That does not get old. Guys, I've done this so many times now in this car, it doesn't get old. Look, it's different than an EV. An EV will thrill you with the G-force. It'll compress your spine. It'll do all those great things, but you don't have the acoustics that accompany that. You don't have a V8 screaming at you, a supercharger piercing your eardrums, and the rumble that comes with it. It's a full body immersion in power and speed. I adore it. And because I know what happens when I do this, how useless it feels to try to put 1,025 horsepower down to the rear tires on not a prepped drag strip surface, I'm not going to again do a real world 0 to 60, but I will replay the last time I did that during my day in the life with this car. Now, I'm not entirely sure how real world this scenario is about to be because I'm going to use the trans brake function in the 170, yet the way you access it is actually pretty simple. So maybe you could just kind of do this at a stoplight in a safe environment. Anyway, hit the trans brake button and then choose one of these different torque maps. And I'm not gonna go for A because I'm not on a drag strip. I know I'm not gonna have the traction I want. I'm gonna go for B. Now with my race box set up to record the 0 to 60 run, I'm gonna pull in both paddles, holding the full brake pressure, give it full throttle, release one paddle. Now we're staged. Release the brake pedal, then release the paddle. Okay, so that didn't work. Well, as evidenced by those tire marks, it would appear torque path B is still too aggressive. We'll do C now as I try trans brake one more time. Both paddles, maintain brake pressure, full throttle, one paddle for staging, then the brake pedal, then the paddle. More control. And there we go, there's 60 in 3.9 seconds. That's some underworld oomph right there. It is a smoke billowing, profanity-inducing exercise in futility. And if the tires weren't so gosh darn expensive and difficult to acquire, I would do it all the time. Alas, I can't. What I can show you is that though the Demon 170 is an absolute riot, joy in a straight line, it is not that in a curve. And that's because the amount of body roll you get with this drag suspension is tremendous. And part of that lean is because of all that tire sidewall that's squishing over, but just being able to identify the source doesn't mean you like it anymore. I do actually like the steering feel, it's pretty solid, but the other part about this car that really makes me not want to do this at any sort of speed is the brakes. They're fine at low speeds, nice and grabby, but at high speeds, you keep pushing your foot all the way to the floor going, please, more stopping power. They're undersized for the amount of power and the speeds this car can achieve. But that is why I bought a sports car, which I will get to in just a moment. But before I do, I have to address probably the biggest daily driver downside to the Demon 170. Ooh, I like that alliteration. It is the fact that, yes, you can fill it up with 91 octane fuel, but why, oh why, maybe this is just me and my own neuroses, but why would you ever put 91 octane, therefore giving yourself just 900 horsepower, when you have the ability to put E85 in and get 1,025 horsepower? So you, like me, will make the much longer drive to a nearby E85 fuel station to put that in, and that just gets taxing after a while. If you're driving this car with the regularity that you can and should because it's such a great daily driver, you are just making extra trips for E85. Now, without further ado, let's go sample the M2 CS's flavor of fun. Okay, I made the switch into the CS, and I did have to move parking lots because there was something going on at the other one. So, let's fire it up. And now, because I had to drive this car to get to this new lot, it's not a proper cold start, so I'm gonna play that for you right now. Definitely not as thunderous of a startup or as intimidating of an idle as the Demon 170, though I guess if you look at it this way, the M2 CS is a much more neighbor-friendly vehicle, though the exhaust is definitely something I want to modify for this car, so stay tuned for that. Before then, I want to throw on my seatbelt now, pull the gear selector over and up into reverse. That prompts a high-res camera system with trajectory lines. I also have the parking sensors up front. And I'm going to pull over here because I need to do a turning radius test. So over into drive, get it all lined up, and then crank the wheel and see about that turning circle. Which is, I mean, pretty good. It's, frankly, for the size of this car, dimensionally being smaller than the Demon 170, I wouldn't say this turning circle is any better than that car. And now as I exit this driveway, this vehicle is lower to the ground, so I have to take things with more angle than I do in the Challenger. But if you do so, it's not that bad. Powertrain in the CS. It's a twin turbocharged 3-liter inline 6-cylinder making 523 horsepower and 479 pound-feet of torque, effectively half the output of the 170 when it's running on E85 fuel. And it is also sent through an 8-speed automatic gearbox to just the rear tires, like in the Challenger. And the way that power is delivered just around town when you've got things set up in efficient for the throttle response is very gentle. You can dig into the throttle a little bit and it's not going to surge, it's just going to build up in a nice progressive way. I would say it's as easy to meander around town in the CS as it is in the Demon 170. However, the ride compliance is not the same. The 170, with its giant tire sidewall and its suspension setup for all that squat, is just more supple than this car. Yes, there are adaptive dampers that are working to try to subdue the worst of road blemishes, but because the CS is tuned for track duty, it's intended to be firmer, it's intended to transfer the texture of the road surface through the steering wheel, through the seat, which is much more rigid than the Challenger's couch cushion chairs. So yeah, you're just not as relaxed. Though I will acknowledge that unless you're taking a long road trip like I did in the CS a while ago, these seats won't really be a problem once you're inside them. They provide enough padding and adjustability for most body types to be relatively chill for around towning or short distance commutes. And I want to say this, each vehicle, the 170 and the M2 CS, generate a sense of occasion the moment you're moving in them, the moment you're in this driver's seat. In the 170, it's the rumble of the V8 and the occasional whiff of supercharger whine that kind of gets you excited. In the M2 CS, it is the fact that it feels so connected to the road. It's the thick padding of this flat bottom steering wheel and the firmness and tightness of these sport bucket chairs along with all the other carbon fiber around me. It feels special, just in a completely different way. And as a driver, here's something I do appreciate more about this car. I can lower the seat as much as I would like for my body type to feel more immersed in the drive, not like in the Challenger where I'm sitting up too high. I don't want to forget about things as simple as the turn signal sound, which is more subdued than the one you hear in the Challenger. And what if someone is driving recklessly and I'm behind the wheel of this car? I'm gonna honk at them and they're gonna hear. That is a very traditional, respectable horn sound. And here's something, if you just thought about comparing a BMW to a Dodge, you would not expect. But if you think more about the intention of each vehicle, it starts to make more sense. The cabin quiet in the Dodge Challenger is better than in this car. I hear more of the road noise through the tires. The wind noise, it's about the same actually between both cars, but the fact that they had to strip out cabin insulation to save some weight in the M2 CS does mean that I'm a little more aware of what's going on around me in this BMW than I am in the Dodge Challenger. And the final consideration for daily drivability is visibility. And you can see out of this car better than the Challenger, whether it's looking straight out over that hood, no obstructions there. The pillars are not too thick here up at the A pillar. The C pillar, that's the biggest win, not nearly as wide as in the Challenger. The view out the back, not really much of an issue, and when you fold down the headrests when they're not in use, like I did that one over there, you can see even better, and you do have blind spot monitoring just like in the Challenger. Oh, and one bonus mention, the simple fact that I'm driving a smaller vehicle dimensionally than the Challenger gives me more confidence maneuvering on tighter roads or in smaller spaces than in that car. I know I can just flip it around where I need to, and I'm not really having to sweat the fact that I don't have a forward-facing camera. And now it's time to talk about the performance. Can this car be anywhere near as exciting to drive in a straight line as something with 1,000 horsepower? I'm in the M1 mode, and I'm just gonna put my foot down. Well, you definitely can't just go wide open throttle in the 170 or you will be completely sideways. And in this car, you can't have traction and stability switched off. I think it's still at stability, but not traction on, without at least getting a little squirrely. That's so fast. The way it squats back is a little reminiscent of the 170, to be honest. It's still like the rear tires don't know what to do with all the power and torque that they're given. They find a way to get it to the ground, and I would say better than in the 170 because you still have to roll on so much more carefully in that car, but good heavens. The mid-range in the CS is astonishing. This car is so fast. Wow. I forget, it's definitely, it's one thing for sure. It is not underwhelming when you come out of that car and you get into this one. These kicks, really hard. And you have just a little more confidence when curves come up that you're not just gonna go veering off the road. What doesn't come with all of that momentum is the same acoustic, enveloping soundtrack like the 170. I mean, the roar of that Hemi V8, the supercharger whine, it's so visceral. This is just not that. It's a good noise, and I definitely still want to hear more of it, which is why I'll come back to getting a valved exhaust at some point, but it just doesn't really deliver the same full body experience as the 170 in that department. Now let's measure that experience with a real world 0 to 60 test. I've got my race box set up here to record, and launching the M2 CS is so much easier than the Demon 170 with its trans brake torque curve science experiment. This, I just have a few settings loaded into M2. So I'm gonna hit that, confirm, foot on the brake, pin the throttle, launch controls preparing, it's active, letting go, hesitation, restraining itself, trying to get it down, and there's 60 at 3.93 seconds. So half the power, same 0 to 60, because the limiting factor is rear wheel drive. But while the 170's thrills in a straight line are pretty much untouchable, on a curvy road, the M2 CS is in its element. Oh, and look at that, a Z3M in a very cool shade of green. Anyway, back to my M car, which just the way it turns in, the way it controls its body, the steering feel, the confidence I have negotiating curves at these speeds, the power, once again, the power, and the braking force of these carbon ceramic brakes, which I did bed properly, along with that limited slip differential at the back and the Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tires, turn this into an absolutely incredible handling machine. And just a joy. This car just inhales the road. And now that I'm in manual mode with the 8-speed auto, it'll run me all the way out to red line, shift instantly, and keep moving forward with surging momentum. Without traction and stability, as I have it now, the back end is nice and loose, but the car is so controllable. Oh my gosh. What a car. These cars have two completely different approaches to going fast, and I love both of them. Okay, I want to summarize my thoughts on this comparison, which is really just ridiculous, I know. You've got a muscle car, you've got a sports car. People are not really going to be cross-shopping these vehicles, but if you did, you'd spend about the same amount of money. But before I actually kind of put a pin in this one, the fuel economy of the M2 CS is 16 mpg city, 23 on the highway, and 19 combined. Not only is that fuel economy better than the 170, but the way you go get gas is so much more convenient. As a daily driver, though the CS is more maneuverable than the Challenger and it has more sophisticated technology, and you know, this is just a little more impressive, the way the Challenger rides and the comfort of the seats, the way you can slide in and out of them easily, it just is a bit more favorable day in and day out. But then when you think about performance, and particularly accessibility to performance, the 170 makes so much power. There are very few instances in the real world when you can actually tap into it much at all. I mean, the theater of the motor is tremendous, and that is very appealing. But just actually being able to put your foot more than just a quarter throttle down, unless you're maybe getting onto a highway, it's It's very rare. Whereas the CS is so locked in. You feel the road, you feel connected to the car, and ultimately you don't have to be going that fast through a curvy road to be engaged. That's a little more attractive. And just personally, I like road courses more than I like drag strips. They're the bookends of the fun car spectrum. The Demon 170 over here, loud and proud and cushy and ridiculously fast. And then on the other end, the M2 CS, dialed and nimble and engaging. Which experience is more your cup of tea? Let me know in the comments. Demon 170, M2 CS. I hope you guys have enjoyed this POV comparison, and I will see you again next time.